if you have solar feeding your common property, then it will increase your neighbour's rating of your building, which can also be a selling point. So do solar panels add value to the property? Yes. There's the small print. Don't sue me if it doesn't. And finally, just to finish on some resources, I'm not going to talk through these in details, but you'll get a copy of the slides. But these are all places that you can go to get help to find out more when you choose to put solar on your building. And that's me. If I can work out how to unshare my screen.
Thanks, Mike. That was great. That was a great overview. I've just seen a couple of questions. One is from Radu. He asks, in the solar for individual units scenario, how are the prime spots on the roof allocated? So, you know, for example, sunnier, etc. Can you comment on that?
That's a very good question, and that's one of the challenges of that arrangement, is that that's something that you need to work out in your strata body. And obviously, if there's only a couple of people who are interested in putting solar on the roof, then that may be less of an issue. But that's the difficulty with that arrangement, is that you need to persuade everybody in the building, or a majority, that the shared resource should be used for individual apartments. I don't have an easy answer on how you do that.
Okay, great. Maybe yeah, Gareth can touch on that a bit later. The other question is from Robert. The majority of common property electricity in high-rise buildings is three-phase. This is for single-phase. Does that mean it can only be used to power common property single-phase, such as lighting, including LED lighting and common property?
Another good question. So, so there are two possible answers to that. One is that you can get three-phase inverters, so you can have a solar system that that will output three phases. And the other is around the metering arrangement, that you can even if you've got the right metering, a single-phase PV solar system can offset three phases of load. So even though you may technically be exporting on one phase and importing on the other, the meter will net those off against each other, so that effectively you're covering the load. But then there's also complications about the amount of export might be an issue, depending on the network operator allowing that amount of export. So it becomes more complicated, but it's not impossible.
Okay, great. All right, well, we'll move on to, yeah, and Mike's going to stick around and answer any relevant questions at the end. But we're moving on to our next speaker, Gareth Hudson from Energy Smart Strata. Gareth is an engineer with 12 years experience in energy consulting. With a background in industrial and commercial sectors, Gareth now focuses on strata. He's worked with over 100 apartment buildings in helping them understand, manage and reduce their energy use. Gareth's client was one of the first apartment buildings in Australia to install a solar array on an existing apartment building. And he's been working very closely with me and my team with helping larger apartment buildings over the last 2 years make significant energy savings in their buildings. So welcome, Gareth. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. And can everyone see the slide I've put up? Yes, everyone can hear. Fantastic.
Yes.
So, great. So we'll get started. So I'm an energy consultant. I don't install solar and I don't sell solar. My job is to work with apartment buildings to help them manage and reduce their energy usage, identify opportunities such as solar, and then work through the cost benefit analysis and help them get quotes and help them to get solar installed. So we've only got half an hour today. It's not a lot of time, so we're going to keep it brief and pragmatic and try to talk about some of the key technical issues we should be aware of and some of the issues that we've encountered when working with our clients over the past couple of years. So the first thing to think about is what do we want to use our roof for? Do we want to put solar panels on our roof or use it for another purpose? Is our roof used for plant equipment, or like this building, a site down in Melbourne, they had a large flat roof and they decided to use that for an outdoor entertaining area. So they chose not to put solar. If we decide we do want to use our roof for solar, we really want you to first make your building as energy efficient as possible and your apartment as energy efficient as possible. The photos we have here of some of the equipment that we have in a typical apartment building. We have pumps, we have pool equipment, ventilation equipment, lighting and fire stairs and car park. This is the critical infrastructure that your apartment building needs to operate. And we want to first invest in this equipment and optimize and manage this equipment first before moving to solar and adding more equipment on. So we really want to first address energy efficiency. Once we've done that, then we look at solar. And here's an example of a client who did just that. So they didn't jump straight to solar. First, they looked at car park ventilation, implemented some controls and got really good savings. Next, they did a lighting upgrade and got really good savings there. And last but not least, installed a 25 kilowatt solar system. And they've now reduced their energy usage by over 50%. So these are the kind of steps that we want your building and your apartment to look at before going straight to solar. And when we are ready for solar, well, before we start getting quotes, we need to have a bit of a think about, is our site really ready? And is solar going to be viable? And what are some of the issues that may be affecting our site? And working with our clients over the past couple of years, we've identified 3 main issues affecting them. The first is the condition of your roof. So whether you have a tiled roof or an iron roof or a concrete roof, we need to have a bit of a think about, are there any leaks with the roof? Have there been any historical issues with leaks with the roof over time? When was the roof last upgraded or maintained? When is it due to be upgraded or maintained in the future? Can we look at our capital works program and find out when it is due for some work? Do we have an older building that the roof has never been looked at in 20, 30 years? You want to get a bit of an idea about this when we start thinking about solar. The pictures here are for a client, a site down in Melbourne. They were very interested in solar, but their roof was not suitable and it had to be upgraded and replaced before they could put solar on. So this is a big thing to think about. A lot of us live in apartment buildings with a flat concrete roof, and that has a waterproof membrane on it. So how do we attach solar panels to this type of roof? The standard option is an anchored or a membrane piercing mounting. So this is where they'll pierce through the waterproof membrane, bolt into the concrete roof, and then seal up around it. Whenever we talk about membrane piercing, people get a little bit nervous. But if you have a roof that's in good condition and a waterproof membrane that's in good condition, there's no reason why you can't go down this option. There's accepted industry practices for how you can mount solar systems on this type of roof. Or the other option is a floating or ballasted system. Here we don't pierce through the waterproof membrane, but the solar panels float, the mounting float sits on top and is weighted down by bricks. And it looks like quite a simple solution, but this is an engineered, robust solution. And this can work for a lot of sites where you may be a bit nervous about piercing the waterproof membrane, or you may need to do some works on your roof in the future. And this is a bit more of a flexible option. Another big issue that Mike talked about is your electrical infrastructure. Now, we don't want to get too technical here, but when we're thinking about solar for our site, we do want to get a little bit of an idea about the condition of our wires and our distribution boards. We want to think about, does our switchboard look like this on the left, nice and orange and shiny and new? Or does it look like this on the right, which is old and messy and a bit haphazard? So there may be a requirement to upgrade some of your electrical infrastructure in order to connect your solar array to your site. We don't need to know too much about this, but we want to have some awareness. So when we get a quote, we can talk to our supplier and say, have you looked at our main switchboard? We know it's quite old. Is it up to standard? Do we need to do any work or not? Another big issue is working safely on your roof and getting access to the roof. So the picture on the left here, this is a site with a large flat roof area. It's quite easy to access this roof, but there's one narrow section that the workers would have to use, and they had to install handrails in order to work safely on this roof. The site in the middle is very interested in solar, but this is a high-rise building and the roof is at a bit of a dangerous slope. And we approached several solar suppliers and none were willing to work on this roof due to safety issues. So solar was not possible for this particular site. And the picture on the right is something we see at a lot of sites where you'll go through a hatchway to get onto the roof. And these hatchways are often quite small and you can't physically fit a solar panel through up onto the roof there. So they need to find another option. Do they need to use a scissor lift to get the panels to the roof? Do they need to get a crane to get the panels to the roof and then the traffic control around that? Some sites have looked at using a top level apartment going out to the balcony and from there onto the roof. So how you can work safely on your roof and how to actually get the panels onto the roof is something we need to start thinking about and be aware of when we go through this solar process. So there's three main types of installations for solar for apartment buildings. The first is just putting solar to supply your common areas. And the classic example here is the tower. We have a relatively high number of apartments with a relatively small roof area, and the roof just can't accommodate panels for the entire site, but it can accommodate solar panels to supply common areas. The second option is to install solar panels to supply common areas and to supply apartments. And the classic example here is a large low-rise apartment complex where there's available roof space to fit solar panels for all the different apartments or most of them. And the common areas still also have a high energy usage, and it's worthwhile putting solar panels to supply the common areas. The final option is apartments only. And the classic example here is a small brick walk up, and there's a nice big roof area. We can use that roof to supply apartments. There is common area electricity usage, but it's so small. There may just be a couple of LED lights in a stairwell or a small pump, and it's just not enough to justify installing solar panel for common areas. So that's where you'll focus, just on the apartments. In regards to the installation we're looking at, the steps that we go through in order to analyze the options and do a cost benefit analysis are the same. So we're going to run through that for an example building here. So this is a client site in Waverley Council, 8 stories high. They've already upgraded their lights to LEDs, so they've already made their building energy efficient. And the next step is then to move on to solar. And these are the steps that we go through to do our solar analysis. So we assess the capacity of the roof. We look at how much electricity they're using during the day. We work out what size kilowatt system is suitable. We do a cost benefit analysis. We identify potential issues such as roof condition. We seek and compare quotes, get a final firm quote, develop the business case, and then the EC approval. So the first step in this is looking at the roof capacity. This particular building had a large flat roof. A solar array requires around about 8 square meters per kilowatt installed. This roof, however, could only accommodate about 30 to 40 kilowatts of solar. And that's because we can't use all the roof. Some of the roof is not usable or suitable. That's due to things such as shading and ventilation and equipment on the roof, access and anchor points, and for some roofs, the orientation too. So there's this fantastic tool called Sunspot, and everyone's homework for tomorrow is to go to this website, type in the address of your apartment building, find your roof, draw an area on the roof that you're interested in, and this tool will estimate what is the area of that roof, how many kilowatts of solar panels can you fit there, and how much electricity will that generate. So this is a really, really useful tool and a really important step to understand what is the generating capacity of our apartment complex. So we know how many solar panels we can fit on our roof, what sort of capacity we can fit. The next question is, well, how much do we actually need? So solar panels generate electricity during the day and around the middle of the day. We're not really interested in how much electricity you use overnight or in the early morning or evening. We want to know how much your apartment or building is using in the middle of the day. Once we know how much electricity you use during the day, well, then we can size the solar array to meet that requirement. And typically a solar array should be 1.5 to 2 times your average daytime energy usage. So a lot of people don't know that the maximum output of your solar array is never going to be as high as its rated size. So if your solar array is rated at 10 kilowatts, the most you'll ever get out of it may only be 7 kilowatts because there's some inherent efficiencies in the system. So we always need to size the solar array a little bit bigger than probably what we think. So ideally we want to get a good understanding of what is our daytime electricity usage. We cannot get that from our billing data. Our bills tell us how much energy we use over a month or over a quarter, and they're great to find out how much we're paying for electricity. But to work out what we use through the day, we really need to go and look at our interval data. Now, this is something your solar supplier can do for you, so you don't necessarily need to get too involved with the interval data. However, it's not that complex, and if you like working with data and Excel, it's quite easy to do. So interval data is data, your energy data recorded in 30-minute intervals. You can get this really easily by contacting your energy retailer and they'll email it out to you. Or you can log into your account online and you can download this data quite often from there. You'll get an Excel file, you can plot that, and we've done that here for this building. And we can look at their energy usage through the day and say it's around about 6 kilowatts. So if they're using about 6 kilowatts, then about maybe say a 9 or 10 or 12 kilowatt system would be suitable for this site. Here we have some examples of the common area, the pattern of energy usage for the common areas of 4 different apartment buildings. So this is just to illustrate that for some apartment buildings, your daytime usage may get lower, it may get higher compared to overnight, it may peak in the morning and evening, or may have these spikes throughout the day. And depending on these different scenarios, depending on the pattern of how you use energy, will dictate what size solar system is going to be best for you. And we're not just talking about common areas, we're also talking about apartments. So these top 2 figures, this is where we've conducted data logging of buildings and we've worked out the average apartment electricity usage for that building. The 2 figures below, this is data from actual individual apartments from other buildings. Now your apartment energy usage during the day, it could be quite high, but it can also be really, really low. And it can be lower than what you may expect. But these 2 apartments, they're only using around about 100 watts on average during the day. So it doesn't mean they shouldn't get solar. It just means we want to be sensible about the size solar system we get. We don't want to install a 10,000 watt solar system to supply 100 or 200 watts of power. We want to be a bit conservative in our solar array. So we want to match our solar array to meet our daytime electricity usage. We don't want to go too big. And why not? If our solar array is too big, then at some point, the array will generate more electricity than we can use at the site, and we're going to export some electricity to the grid. And we quantify that by the export ratio. So the export ratio is the percentage of electricity generated by your array, which is going back to the grid. Now, we always expect there'll be some export ratio. The output of a solar array varies from season to season, day to day, and so does your usage. Generally, we say if the export ratio is 10% or less, it's looking pretty good. Any higher than 10%, and we start to think, well, maybe this solar system is getting a bit oversized. And here we have data for our site. That's our analysis showing the daytime usage or the usage of the site in blue, and we have the output of a solar array in summer and the output of a solar array over winter. And we can see there are points when the output of the solar array will be greater than what the site needs, and there will be some electricity going back to the grid. And for this particular site, this analysis showed that the export ratio would be 10%, and that's looking quite good. But we don't want to go too big. A lot of solar suppliers will tell us that we want to install a bigger and bigger solar array. They're going to say, look, there's this really high feed-in tariff, it's a lot more cost effective to go bigger, and that's not necessarily the case. So the feed-in tariff, IPART tells us it's around about 9 to 10 cents per kilowatt hour. If we look at what's offered in the market at the moment, it goes from 0, no feed-in tariff, all the way up to 21 cents per kilowatt hour. And 21 cents per kilowatt hour may sound good. It may sound great, but it's not. It's good, it's okay, but it is not great. If they're offering you a really high feed-in tariff, most likely they're going to compensate by having higher charges elsewhere. And we're looking at this now with the example of an actual building. They installed a 24.6 kilowatt solar array. They have an export ratio of 18%, which is quite high. So this building, we think, went a little bit too big with their solar system. AGL right now has a few different plans. They have their solar saver plan with a 21 cents per kilowatt hour feed-in tariff, which sounds great, but their other charges are higher. And their standard plan, which has a much lower feed-in tariff, costs on a whole under that plan are $1,500 cheaper per year. So we don't just want to be attracted to this idea of a high feed-in tariff. We want to try to crunch some numbers and work out what is most cost effective for our site. And often it's more cost effective to size the solar system to meet our requirements, not go too big, don't overcapitalize and don't overinvest in a very large system. The same way, if your apartment building has a car park with 100 lights, if you want to upgrade those lights, you're going to have a lighting supplier come and quote to upgrade 100 lights. The lighting supplier is never going to say, well, while we're on site, let's chuck an extra 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 lights. But solar suppliers will say, look, while we're on site, we may as well put more and more panels. And it's not a bad idea to put a few extra panels, but we want to be a bit sensible and conservative in the size of our system. So what are the cost benefits of solar? So the cost to install solar varies a lot. A good ballpark figure is about $1.4 thousand to $1.8 thousand per kilowatt installed. We've seen it much less than that, and we've seen it much higher, but that's a good ballpark figure. What are the savings? Well, 1 kilowatt of solar gives us about 1,350 kilowatt hours of electricity per year. However, not all of this may be a saving. The saving is only what we generate and what we use. That's the real saving. The payback on solar typically varies between 4 and 8 years. Solar is a long-term investment, and a payback of 4 or 8 years is great, but we want to get an idea of that by doing a cost-benefit analysis. So for our sites, we do quite a detailed cost-benefit analysis. What I've presented here is a bit of a simplified version. And for those of you who like crunching numbers, this may be helpful for that. So for our site, in our example, we know the roof capacity is about 30 kilowatts. We know our daytime electricity usage is only about 6 kilowatts. So we say, well, maybe a 10 kilowatt solar array is suitable for us. We don't need to install 30 kilowatts, let's go to 10 kilowatts. We can estimate a rough ballpark figure for how much it costs to install, which is $16,000. We can estimate how much electricity we will save. We can apply our daytime rate, work out some cost savings, and get a payback. So here we get a rough idea of the payback's about 4.6 years. And this is a really good point to say, look, is solar looking cost effective and viable for our particular site and our situation? If so, let's keep moving forward. But again, this sort of analysis is only for the people who really want to go to that sort of next degree of complication. So it's time to get some solar quotes. So we want to get quotes from at least 3 suppliers. You're going to need to approach a lot more than 3 suppliers to actually get 3 quotes. So strata is a bit of a tricky beast. It sits somewhere between the household residential sector and the commercial sector. The solar suppliers who work in residential and the solar suppliers who work in commercial large scale installations. With strata, we're often talking about relatively small solar systems, but a relatively high level of complexity. So we need to find installers who have experience working in strata. And we need to find installers who have a good reputation, which we may be able to find by Googling the company and finding out information that way. And we definitely need to make sure our solar installer is CEC accredited. All of them should be, but it's something that we need to check out for. When we get our quotes, we're going to need to provide some information. The solar supplier is going to need to have some electricity bills. They're going to need interval data. Either you get it and provide it to them, or they can get a letter of authority from you and they can access this data from your energy retailer for you. It's great if we have some idea about some of the site-specific issues, such as the roof condition, old wiring, we can communicate. Excuse me. It's great if we have a rough idea of what size kilowatt system we're talking about. If not, then they'll do the analysis for us. We don't really need to work out what kilowatt size, but it's great if we can have a think of it for that too. We need to provide the site contact details for how they can conduct a site inspection and give them a project time frame as well. So when we get our quotes, excuse me, each quote is going to be in a vastly different format. Some of these quotes will be 1 or 2 pages. Some solar suppliers will send you 3 or 4 PDFs of 10, 20 pages each, full of colorful graphics and figures. And what we need to do is know what is the key information we need to know. We need to extract that information to allow a like-for-like comparison. And what's not included in the quote is often more important than what is included in the quote. So here's a solar quote checklist that we use, or we use something similar for this for our clients. So we'll quickly run through these. What is the size of the solar system they're proposing? What is the cost? The cost is not the most important factor. A solar panel, solar system is a long-term investment. And a small increase in cost now could pay for itself over the life of the system. Is the cost they provided a firm cost? Has the installer actually been to the site and inspected your switchboard and your roof? So a lot of solar suppliers like to do what's called a desktop analysis, where they look at satellite image of your roof and their solar software, they get some site information from you, and they'll estimate what the cost is. It's only when the installer then goes to your site and has a look around that they actually revise and provide a final quote. And often that can vary quite a bit. So we really want these solar installers to come and inspect the site and give a firm quote. We need to look at product quality. How do we assess product quality? We look at the warranty on the panels, on the inverter, and the workmanship. And I'll talk about that more in a moment. We want to know what sort of mounting type are they talking about? Is it anchored or ballasted? Are they looking at flat or tilt mounted panels? This information is often not specified, so we need to go back and ask them about this. We need to make sure this installer has experience working in strata, is reputable, and of course they're CEC accredited. What is included in their quote, what isn't? Have they included meter upgrades and Ausgrid approvals and other aspects like that? With monitoring, all solar systems these days ideally should have some form of monitoring where you can use your app on your phone or a website and see the performance of the system. Is there an annual fee for this? Or is that included over the lifetime of the system? And do they offer maintenance as well? So in terms of warranties, there's a few key warranties that we want to look out for. The first one is the solar panel product warranty. So this is the warranty from the manufacturer for the life of the solar panel. This ranges from 10 to 25 years. Generally say 15 years is not too bad, 25 years is best practice. There's another warranty for the solar panels called a solar panel performance warranty. And this one's not as important. This is where the manufacturer says, yes, we know the output of a solar system does degrade a little bit over time, and we're going to specify what that degradation of that range is over time. This one is not as important. A really important one is the inverter warranty. So the inverter is known as the brains of the system. This is what converts the DC electricity from the solar panels into the AC electricity that your site can use. And this is expensive, complex equipment. It won't last 25 years, but we want it to last as long as possible. And the inverter warranties range from 5 to 12 years, and we really want a minimum of 10 years. This is one area where you don't want to compromise. You want a 10-year warranty on your inverter. There's also a warranty on the workmanship too. So, and that's generally 5 to 10 years. And if they are CEC accredited, there's some requirements on the type of warranty they offer on the workmanship they provide. Yes, there is a government incentive. It's the STC, Small Scale Technology Certificate Rebate. It's around about $500 per kilowatt. We don't need to know too much about this. This will already be included in your quote from your solar supplier. They will show the total installation costs, and they will also show the rebate, and then they'll show the net cost payable to you. How do we know which panel and which inverter is best? Now, we don't need to be experts on all the different companies and all the different types of panels and inverters. If we get 3 quotes from reputable companies, then these companies will recommend the products that they use. So the quote will specify what panel and what inverter they want to use at your site. So we don't need to compare all the panels and all the inverters in the market. We just need to compare the panels and the inverters in the 3 quotes that we've received. There's lots of good comparison websites out there which rank or provide information on the quality of the different panels and converters. And a really good one is Solar Quotes. So these figures here are from the website Solar Quotes. And Solar Quotes also has some really detailed comparison tables. So once we have our quotes from our 3 suppliers, we have the model numbers of the panels, we go to a site like this, we type them in, and we can see all the differences, and we can see the differences in key things such as such as warranties. Moving forward, we do need to touch on the fact that there are a few different types of inverters. There's a traditional string inverter. This is a box that sits on the wall, converts the DC electricity from the panels into AC electricity. All the panels are connected in a series or a string. This is a nice, simple, robust system. The disadvantage is one poor performing panel can affect the performance of the entire array. To mitigate that, there's an option of microinverters. This is where every solar panel has a small microinverter on the back of each panel. This can be a bit more expensive, but this is really good for sites where there may be shading on some panels. And with this system, one badly performing panel won't affect the rest. And in the middle, we have the solar edge inverter, which is a bit of a mix between the two. We still have an inverter on the wall, the box on the wall, and each solar panel will have what's called a power optimizer. And this helps to monitor each individual panel and again, make sure that one underperforming panel will not affect the rest. Batteries, quickly to touch on batteries, we still do not believe they are cost effective and not recommended for apartment buildings. By that we mean they'll probably not pay for themselves off the life of the equipment. It's better to let's size our solar system to meet what we need rather than going way too big on our solar system and then using batteries. Batteries are still pretty expensive and batteries are really suited to off-grid applications. Funding and business case. So for funding, there's the option to purchase the solar system outright through your capital works fund, or there are other financing options too. We won't go into detail here, but there's a leasing option where you can lease the solar system over a period of time, and at the end of that time, you can own it, or someone else can effectively install the solar system and you can buy electricity from them from that solar array. In terms of selling the business case of solar to the executive committee, so we need to know what the payback is. We need to show we've conducted a relatively comprehensive cost-benefit analysis to understand, is that payback realistic? Once the system has paid for itself off, it's delivering free, clean energy, and we have a very long system life with very low maintenance. If we go through the steps we've talked about today, we want to demonstrate we have sourced good quality products with a long warranty. We understand the warranties we're looking at, and we've chosen products with a good warranty, and we've researched and found reputable installers. We want to show that we've addressed any site-specific issues, and it's also important to know that this is a growing industry. There's lots of apartment buildings installing solar, so there's nothing new or scary about it. And getting near the end now, there are alternatives to solar. Not every building can install solar for some reasons, and there is this option to get clean, green, renewable energy through green power. A lot of people look down at green power, but it is not warranted whatsoever. There's really no big difference between installing a renewable energy power plant on your roof, solar, or using that money to buy renewable energy from a large-scale renewable energy power plant somewhere else, such as a wind farm. For an example, looking at the site that we've been talking about today, they could install a 12.5 kilowatt solar system for around about $18,000. And we worked out that would supply about 25% of their common area electricity usage with solar power, with renewable power. Or instead of installing solar, they could buy 25% of the electricity from the grid from a large-scale renewable energy plant that would cost around about $800 per year. And they could use that $18,000 that would spend on solar to buy green power for the next 20 years. Then green power drives investment in new large-scale renewable energy generation, which is something that Australia critically needs as much as we need solar panels on roofs as well. Lastly, here's just a quick case study of a client who installed 25 kilowatt solar system, and we have some data showing their common area electricity usage before and after the solar system. All right, now I think it's time to move on to Nicola. So I'll keep sharing the screen and I'll mute myself.
So I'm just going to do a few slides around getting approvals from your owners corporation. Once you're really happy with the business case, how do you actually get approval to installing solar power? And whether you're installing solar to power common property or for individual dwellings, the installation must be approved at a general meeting of the owners corporation. So either an annual general meeting or an extraordinary general meeting. And a lot of strata properties have strata managers that can assist with this. So for installations to power common property, it's just a motion on the agenda. Solar installation on common property for personal use needs common property rights bylaw. So if you were to hold a general meeting today, such motions and common property rights bylaws would require a special resolution. There's currently a bill in Parliament to introduce a new type of resolution And by the way, these slides have been prepared by Christine Byrne from Green Strata, and I'll be sending a link around, a web link to Green Strata, which is great information. And she's advised that there's this bill in Parliament currently introduce a new type of resolution. It's called a sustainability infrastructure resolution, which will lower the voting threshold for certain sustainability infrastructure upgrades and changes to strata buildings. So that bill is expected to pass in late July and take effect immediately. Just going to move on to the next slide if I can. Not moving. Oh, Gareth, can you move the slide for me? Can you change the slide? Thank you. Okay. There has so there's always been widespread misunderstanding of what a special resolution is. Many think you need 75% of all owners in a strata scheme, but that's not really how it works. It's the percentage is only applied to those who actually attend the meeting, so in person or by proxy, and who are eligible to vote. So flip it around, assume that you just need everyone who attends a meeting. You need 75% of everyone who attends a meeting in favour of that project. The same principle will apply to sustainability infrastructure resolutions. It's even possible to pass these resolutions with only one person at the meeting. So if that person is the chairperson who declares there's a quorum for the meeting after 30 minutes. So I'm getting into the technical details around how to get approvals and voting thresholds, but it's all really important information to know. Gareth, can you go to the next slide? I'm just going to touch on this. Some of that slide has kind of disappeared, but there are types of changes to common property that will be now approved by a sustainability infrastructure resolution. So this is just if you're interested, and this is how sustainability infrastructure resolutions could be defined in a month. So there's things like changes to common property around reducing greenhouse gas emissions and waste pollution and that sort of thing. And the next slide, Gareth. And so many owners wishing to install solar for their own use have been quoted really large amounts for common property rights bylaws, sometimes up to $2,000, to have that bylaw drawn up and for an EGM to be called to pass it. So I just want to end on some really great news. So very soon, once this Sustainability Infrastructure Bill has been passed in Parliament, there will be finally a comprehensive solar bylaw kit available for purchase for the very reasonable price of $147. And I will be sending out a link to participants to that strata solar bylaw kit when it's ready. So that's good news. And I know there were a few questions that registered attendees had been posting about solar bylaw templates. It's coming. The good news, it's coming. So I'm going to stop there, and Gareth, you don't have to share your screen anymore. But there are a good number of great questions that I'll put to Gareth if you want to unmute yourself. Yep. So one of the questions is, can you let me have a look. Can you comment on the use of battery to store excess power for use at night, and is it still cost efficient? Still not cost efficient, apparently. Apologies.
Yeah, so look, the general consensus in industry is it's still not cost effective if you're in an apartment or an apartment building to use batteries. So there is that feed-in tariff. We know the feed-in tariff isn't great, but it's still something. And if our solar system is a little bit big and a little bit goes back to the grid, it's better just to keep things simple, get that small feed-in tariff and not install batteries. Batteries most likely will not pay themselves off over their life. There's also issues in terms of where you locate batteries in apartment buildings too, because batteries are a bit of complex equipment and there's fire standards requirements around that too. So if you're in a house, maybe if you really want to go down that path, in an apartment building, we'd still recommend against it.
Another question is, before installing solar panels, is it advisable to get a structural engineer to assess the roof's ability to install solar?
Yeah, if you think that's an issue for your site, then it's worthwhile looking into that. So if you think that your roof condition or waterproof membrane or the structure is an issue, then you probably will have to get someone to look into that. You could get some quotes first, but it's always a good idea to get that done first and have those sort of issues highlighted and identified first.
And I will just add that you can ask the solar supplier to a quoting for your solar power project if they include in their price a structural engineering assessment, because some solar suppliers will, or they can recommend a structural engineer to do that for you. There is a question about what can solar power be used for in terms of lights and heating and power to lifts. You can use solar power for all energy using equipment, and that's fed through the meter. So that hopefully that answers that question. There's a question I'm not sure Gareth, you would be able to answer, but do we need to get the solar system insured by building insurance? I'm not sure. Have you come across that before?
That is a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry. That could be a question that we may have to think about and come back to the person with.
Another question is flat versus tilted mounting. Is one better than the other?
Yeah, so a slight tilt on the solar panels is great for cleaning and maintenance. They're more self-cleaning and they can have a bit of a higher output. So I think you tend towards a tilted option. And if the roof has a natural lean, then it's great to utilize that.
That's a good segue into another question about what are the common maintenance problems with solar panels and the systems?
So I guess there's not a lot. There's very low maintenance. The panels could do with the clean every now and then. It is always good to check on the performance using your web monitoring tool. But I haven't really experienced that great a need for that much maintenance compared to all the other equipment that you'll have at your apartment building.
Yeah, okay. And then this is a very technical question about microinverters. Do they simplify the installation by having AC cables from roof to switchboard, typically in the basement?
Good question. The actual connection, I wish I knew the answer. The actual connection of the microinverters to the board and how that's accomplished, I'm not too sure. Maybe someone else speaking today can speak on that.
We'll take that on note, and we might come back to you via email with an answer on that. I do want to go back to an earlier question regarding, how do you allocate roof space to individual units? I saw that John Hutchinson, and thank you, John, for your comment. He answered as regards getting the best roof spots for individual lots solar panels. That consider that a special privilege or special rights bylaw can actually include a provision for the owners to pay a fee or compensation to the owners corporation for a nice piece of roof. So that, thank you for that comment. That can be covered by the solar bylaw. And I'm just going to look at another couple of questions before we move on. Is it true that roofers put off making repairs to roofs if solar panels are in place? So in event of storm damage, what are the issues getting knowledgeable tradesmen?
If you have an issue with your roof with solar panels, look, issues happen with roofs all the time. Solar panels, they can be moved and relocated while you do some works there. I haven't heard of any examples of that. Yeah.
Okay.
What are your thoughts, Nicola?
I really can't comment actually, but there have also been some positive comments for your presentation. So thanks so much for presenting, and Gareth's going to stick around for any other kind of relevant questions at the end. So our next speaker is Alex Marks, and I saw a few questions registered about sharing technologies and the Illume model. Alex is the COO of Illume Energy, a company dedicated to extending the benefits of rooftop solar to all, which is fantastic. Illume Energy has invented the SolShare, a technology which allows one rooftop solar installation to be shared by apartments in the same building. Alex leads Illum's public affairs and policy work. Prior to settling in Melbourne, Alex worked in natural resources management and climate change mitigation across Southeast Asia and Kenya. So welcome, Alex. It's great to see such an innovative technology that's also Australian made. So over to you.
Thank you, Nicola, and thank you to Michael and Gareth for their presentation so far, and to the City of Waverley for hosting this event. As Nicola said, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Illum Energy. I'll get to what we do in a bit, but I just want to, at the start, just talk about one of the things we've already heard a bit about. What are the existing ways of getting solar onto your apartment building? Michael kind of went into a bit of depth as to what they are, and then Gareth went into some of the technical considerations around them. At the moment, it's quite easy to get common light and power solar installations, so 10 to 20 kilowatts or something connected to your common light and power circuit. So you can run the lights, the lifts, the garage doors, and so on solar. Michael also covered off embedded networks, and he's right, there are a lot of regulatory challenges involved in getting them put in place, and sometimes not the best customer outcomes. There has been some issues with price gouging by embedded networks and investigations by federal and state authorities because of that. So they're kind of the two existing options. Common light and power, definitely an idea. The downside of it, though, is there's no direct benefit to residents in the building because they're not actually having their apartments connected to the solar installation. So the solution I want to talk to tonight is one that is being pioneered by the company I work for, Illum Energy, and that is behind the meter solar sharing. So behind the meter solar sharing is facilitated by a technology we've invented, which is called the Sol Share. And the Sol Share splits the solar generated from a single rooftop PV system to multiple apartments in the same building. It can be applied to apartment buildings, but also shopping centres, industrial parks, anything where there's multiple things under one roof. And the way it works is that you have your rooftop solar panels on the roof, as you would with a house, and the direct current electricity from it comes down to the inverter, which could be on the roof, but it's usually in the basement. And the inverter converts it to AC electricity, as Gareth went through. The AC electricity then is fed to the Illum Sol Share, which is here. And then the Illum Sol Share splits it up and then supplies it to each apartment in the building. Now, the benefits of this are that the customers stay connected to the national electricity market, which means that they can choose their own electricity retailer. So if you're with Momentum Energy, you can stay with Momentum Energy. If you're with AGL and you want to stay with them, you can. Or if you want to change to another electricity provider, you can do that too. The other benefit is that you also get all the protections that come with being on the national electricity market, which might not be available to embedded networks. And you also get the benefit of the feed-in tariff for any solar electricity that is exported to the grid. The beauty of the Sol Share is that it optimizes the supply of solar to connected apartments in the building to maximize the on-site consumptions and therefore the savings. It's also quite easy to install from a regulatory perspective because it just fits in behind the meter for each connected apartment. So you don't need everybody to be on board like you do with installing an embedded network because you're actually changing over their electricity retailer. Okay, so I've gone into some of the points about how it works. Happy to take questions about that at the end. And now I'll talk about some case studies of where we've actually implemented this technology in Australia. So the first case study is in Neutral Bay. This building this installation occurred in February. A 16 kilowatt installation was put in place. It shares solar to 3 apartments and common light and power. So these are actually quite large, quite luxury apartments. As you can see from the photo, their view is very nice. And it's got 3-phase power. So quite high demand. They're running induction cookers, large air conditioning units, and so on. So since it was commissioned on the 11th of February, this 16 kilowatt AC capacity solar installation has met 28% of their electricity needs. Now, keep in mind that a lot of people have been working from home during that period, and so the electricity demand is actually higher. They've already saved $1,000 on their bills in the 4 or so months that have passed since then. And the payback period is therefore less than 5 years. That calculation of $1,000 is based on the average tariff in New South Wales as judged by CanStar Blue. So the next case study I want to talk about is an installation we did in Melbourne. This was 8 apartments with 2 shops on the ground floor and 2 common meters, one for a car stacker. This installation had a 12 kilowatt capacity inverter installed, and over the summer, it met 45% of the apartment electricity needs of the building, which is quite remarkable. Now, the apartments have saved, therefore, $111 each, and the payback period is less than 5 years. Now, when you consider that they paid less than $2,000 per lot for this installation, it's not the biggest amount of money to outlay. If you're installing a 5 to 8 kilowatt system for a detached house, you'd expect to pay $5,000 to $8,000. So paying $2,000 for an apartment owner is actually not that much money compared to what it could be in a detached house. Okay, so how can you get the Sol Share and how can you get a shared solar system that it enables? The first way, and the most common that we've had so far, and this applies to the 2 case studies I've talked about just earlier in Neutral Bay and in Melbourne, is where the system is bought outright by the strata scheme. A Loom Solar installer partner, and we've got plenty of them in New South Wales, they install the rooftop PV system plus the Sol Share in one project. After it's installed, the residents enjoy free solar and there's no more further cost. There's no ongoing maintenance fee or anything like that for the Sol Share. So that's how most installations have occurred so far. As Nicola covered, this requires a decision-making process by the Strata Committee, and Nicola outlined how that might be changing in the future due to some new laws being brought in the New South Wales Parliament. The second way is a new thing that we're doing in partnership with an electricity retailer called LPE. Their website's on the screen there, and they will actually be paying for systems up front for a strata scheme. So for this to happen, all that has to happen is some of the residents in the building have to opt in to LPE as their energy retailer. And they will then get a single bill for solar and grid electricity. So they don't have to worry about paying 2 bills. There's just 1 bill for both types of energy combined. Another requirement is that the common area meter has to be signed over to LPE as well. That's just to give them an anchor customer, if you will, in the building. But aside from that, there's no catch. Residents can opt in, they can churn off if they want. If they do, the solar will be switched off remotely, but that's the only requirement. So this is a really exciting model because I know there's a lot of financial pressures on people at the moment because of COVID, and some strata schemes are probably looking really hard at their development budgets over the future and their maintenance budgets, and maybe spending $25,000 on solar for 20 apartments is a bit too much. But this is a way that they can get it with no upfront cost. So that's everything I've got to present to tonight. If you have any questions specific to your building, feel free to send an email to info@illumenergy.com.au. We have a lot of information on our website, which is up there as well. Happy to take questions during the Q&A time later, or send something to chat and I'll try and type a response. Thank you, and back to Nicola.
Hi, Alex. Thank you so much. What a fantastic technology, and finally something that's kind of overcome the barriers to solar for strata. There is one question that I will throw to you at this time, which is from John Hutchinson. What is the maximum size of building, like number of apartments, that a Loom Sol Share will work with?
So there's no real maximum number of apartments that's a concern. It's more some of those issues that Michael talked about at the start with regard to the height of the building and also what other things there are on the roof. So that's the more important consideration. So if your building's 50 stories tall, we're not your answer. If your building's got a lot of furniture on the roof, like hot water boilers, air conditioner units, It's got odd things jutting out that make a lot of shading. Might not also be a problem as well because there might not be enough room for the panels. But aside from that, generally we find that anything 6 stories or less, there's enough room to make a really big impact on the electricity consumption if you install the soul share. The reason for that is because of that optimization. So if you're using electricity during the day, but then you step out, the solar stops getting directed to you and instead it goes to your neighbor. So it just kind of makes sure that you get as much value as you can out of those panels on the roof by doing that optimization. So 6 stories or less, there's no upper limit on the number of apartments that can be connected. The soul share, if there's too many apartments for one soul share, we just put in 2. So
and correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but I think the looms worked with buildings as small as 3 units and as large as, say, 57 or
yeah, about that.
units. Yeah.
Yeah. So
okay.
we've done some buildings in Melbourne that have over 50 apartments, and they've got about 1.5 to 2 kilowatts of solar each, and that's met 50% of their summer demand. So an appropriately sized system.
Yeah. And can you comment on what's the difference between, or is there any difference between the LPE model, which is the no upfront cost financing model, and an embedded network?
So the difference there is that with the LPE model, you're actually getting some benefit from the solar. So the way that LPE does it is if you consume solar instead of electricity from the grid because you're using appliances during the day because you're working from home or something, you actually get the benefit of using the cheaper electricity because they charge a lower price for that. With an embedded network, it's all blended together. And so you don't get the benefit of trying to shape your usage, i.e. switching on the air conditioner when the sun comes out or putting on the dishwasher during the middle of the day. You don't get any benefit from that. They're still going to charge you 25 cents a kilowatt hour, whatever the rate may be, regardless of whether it's from solar or from the grid. But with the LPE model, they know whether you got it from the panels or from the grid, and they reward you for taking it from the panels.
And one just final question before we move on, because we've only got 10 more minutes, but which is a very pertinent question. How do you manage, and this is from Rob, how do you manage sharing the demand when one apartment has high daytime use versus another that is mainly like nighttime use? How do you make sure there's that equity?
Yeah, okay. So what we have is we call it the fair share system. So basically it optimizes supply for when you use it, but over the course of a month, it evens it out. So if you're a heavy demand user during the day and you use up what's estimated by the soul share to be your solar allocation within the first 20 days, it'll actually cut off your supply and then give it to the other people so that they catch up with the amount they consume that month. There's a lot of interest in that by strata schemes because they want it to seem fair. Everyone gets their same amount of kilowatt hours from the solar panels. Whether they use it or whether it goes to the grid, it still reflects a saving on their electricity bill. So for equality, a lot of people think that that's the good way to go. And it's just a software setting on our soul share that we can set to from the start of the installation. And it's something that can be changed later back to just purely optimizing on demand as well. But more often than not, if a strata scheme is buying it outright, they want the fair share algorithm from the start.
Yeah. Okay. There are a few other questions, but I'll let Alex reply to them in the chat, so you can have a look at the chat. There's just a couple of stories that I want to get to. The first, I've invited Edna Ross to speak with us about her story. Edna Ross is a strata owner from a small block of 5 units in Bondi. A few years ago, she, along with her 4 neighbouring apartments, installed solar power systems to service each of their individual units. So welcome, Edna.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us today. So you've put solar power systems on 2016. Can you just tell us why you went about doing that?
Well, I always wanted to have solar power, and so because I'm an environmental activist, and I wanted to help save the planet. But because I lived in an apartment rather than a house, I didn't really see how I could do it. And so when it became feasible, it started exactly with an information evening like this that Strata New South Wales put on 4 years ago with Waverley Council and Woollahra and Randwick, where people who were looking at how to put solar on strata. So I was terribly excited and I went to the seminar, but all the case studies and all the information was for buildings where the solar panels powered only the common areas. There was nothing on individual apartments. And as someone said before, like with our building, the common areas hardly use any energy. You know, there's 2 LEDs, there's no lift, there's no pool, there's no car park. So, and a lot of the buildings in Bondi, of course, are like that. So we didn't even put it on for the common areas. But the seminar gave me access to, I met various people who knew a lot about solar and recommended suppliers and so on, and told me the information I needed to get. And so that's it. So, but just to tell you how quick it was, I think the information evening was, I don't know, maybe February or March 2016. And we had our panels and all systems going by August 2016. So it was really very smooth and easy to do.
And did you have any like challenges that you faced along the way?
Well, I think we were incredibly lucky because all of us wanted it. I mean, no one, I undertook all the work before I knew if anyone else wanted it. So that, because I was really keen, and I knew a little bit about it and what I wanted. And then I talked to Ethan and I met with, I got the names of 2 suppliers and I asked them what systems, blah, blah, blah. And so then I sent an email with all the information I had gathered to all my co-owners and said, I went to this seminar, blah, blah, and I'm interested in putting solar panels on the roof to power our individual apartments. What do you think? And they all said yes. And the other thing that made it really easy was that it didn't cost us individually anything, because we paid out of this. We've got a 10-point-something kilowatt system. We've got 40 panels on the roof. The roof is northwest facing and has enough room, obviously, for 40 panels. So 8 panels for each apartment. And each panel has a micro inverter at the back of it. And we paid for the whole system out of the sinking fund in Strata. And then the following year, we just each topped up the sinking fund a little bit. So each owner put in $2,000, but not even at the time of actually buying it. So that gave us time to pull together $2,000. So that was it.
Great. And just finally, 4 years on, have you noticed a big difference to your energy bills?
Well, I did a calculation comparing the first year that I used panels, that we had panels, compared to the year before, and I had saved $500 in that year. 2 of the others I worked it out, and they had saved about $300 each. The main thing to do is to use all your main equipment during the day. And then it doesn't go through the grid at all. You don't pay anything for it.
We've lost sound.
Oh.
I can hear you, Edna.
Okay. So how much you save obviously depends on when you're using your electricity, how much, like if you've got electric or gas, hot water, blah, blah. So there's lots of variations, but yes, there's a lot of saving. And there's a lot of saving on the carbon footprint.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. So it's
We
you can see
we haven't had any maintenance problems at
We've
all.
lost sound.
I don't think anyone else is having issues with sound. Sorry.
No, I haven't lost sound.
Yeah. So we'll just continue. I'm sorry for any
That's all right.
difficulties
So
on your side, but the photos show your solar powered system, fantastic north facing roof,
yeah.
ideal scenario when you've got all 5 units on board, so approvals can be a lot easier. And I'm glad to hear that you're saving money, and also that you haven't had any maintenance issues, which is generally the case with solar
Well,
panels.
because of the angle of the roof as well, they're self-cleaning, because if when it rains, they just get cleaned. But so they've now been in for over 4 years, and we will have them cleaned at some point. But it's they're performing beautifully, and
That's
so
great. Thank you so much for sharing that story with us. I've also got Nathan Haig from Zinc Apartments. Nathan is the chair of the committee at Zinc Apartments, and they identified and installed a solar powered system after a lighting upgrade in their common areas a few years ago with amazing results. So this is really relevant for like the medium to larger buildings that are on the call, on the webinar tonight. Yeah, so Nathan, welcome.
Thank you.
Can you tell us firstly what you did and the results?
What I did, so everyone can read there. So there's lots. It's a good news story, really. But I think the key part to this is the work that was done beforehand. So reduce your consumption to start with, and actually get a third party. We got a third party study, so it took the emotion out of the equation. This is actually done by Ethan Burns at Sustainability Now. We got a grant for it from the council. So what it did, it reduced the conversation to a fact-based conversation, not an opinion-based conversation. So it made the viability of the potential project very clear in black and white with an unbiased opinion. And that made the rest of the process, which was really an engagement process with the committee and the other owners, a really straightforward part of the process. So there's lots of things that have been spoken about tonight, which are, some fabulous information there. But what I will say to everyone is just, be aware, but don't be alarmed. There's lots of detail there, but there's also lots of experts, and there's lots of really, really quality providers out there as well. So it's easy for us all to jump on to, some of the Facebook negatives for some of the rogue operators, but, there's some great news stories out there. And there's one of the reasons why there's been so much uptake of solar in Australia is because it's achievable and reasonably straightforward. And, I'm an Englishman. I get excited when the sun comes out. So, I'm happy to be a part of it, but I've also spent a lot of time working, in various commercial roles as well. So I know these things need to pay for themselves financially, and then we can get to some sort of moral obligation as well. So the real process there was, and there's some of the savings there. So there's all the process that we spoke about, the study, having a phased approach, not letting necessarily any naysayers dominate the conversation. You just have to prove what's happening. So you need an advocate there. Thank you. As an environment, we had a financial advocate as well. So we had turns out there was an accountant on the committee who looked at it purely from a financial perspective, and he spoke about that. We treated the initial lighting upgrade, and there's a few other bits and pieces with some of the ventilation systems as an operating expense as part of the general maintenance of the building. And then solar, we treated as capital, so we took that from the Capital Works Fund. The bylaw approval, once we got to that stage of bylaw approval, we'd communicated, we'd engaged with the owners, we'd engaged with the committee, we'd shared the information. So sharing is really, really important. Then, the bylaw approval became really straightforward. We've spoken about the proof of concept from the independent expert that supported the case. And once we did that, got the solar installed, didn't go too hard too early, just had an incremental approach, understood from the finances what they could withstand as a phase 1 approach, and then there was always a phase 2 and a phase 3. But certainly from a phase 1, it's like, what can we withstand, and let's shoot for that. And then once the project's been installed, get a review. Have we achieved what we set out to achieve? And the answer was yes. And again, got the same party to do that. So validate the information from the case study and the study that they did to start with to prove the case. And then once it's in, demonstrate that success. So it's their age-old thing, tell people what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. So it just reinforces that message. Great success. Share those graphs that you've just seen and a few other bits and pieces in the studies on the notice board. Share them with the residents, tenants, owners. And what that meant was there was a great success, but it also meant that it was a building block for future sustainability projects as well. So in the last few weeks, I've tripled the size of we have tripled the size of the solar installation on the building, which means that we've now got an excess in summer, but in winter we're perfect sized. But that also means that we're sort of building some future cases for additional supply into the building network for whether it's EV or any solar for future heat pump systems for waters and bits and pieces like that. So always have an idea about what the end goal is, and then just have at least a phased approach along the way.
Thanks, Nathan. That's such a great success story to share with everyone, and there's some fantastic insights and tips that people can take away with them from tonight. I realise that we're just past 8 o'clock, so I'm just going to stop sharing that screen and see if there's any last minute questions. And sorry, will the presentations be shared? Yes, I'll send a link with all the attached presentations and some useful links as well. There's a question for you, Nathan. What was the reason for the owners corporation to set up a bylaw in addition to the normal resolution to approve when it was for common property?
To be honest, we followed the guidance of the strata manager, and it was a slightly cautious approach. So we just went for the cautious approach, as guided by the strata manager. So it seemed that it was going to be fine regardless, but we thought we just go that route. Okay.
There's a lot of really positive feedback coming in from everyone, and so I want to, on their behalf and my behalf, thank all the presenters tonight for sharing their fantastic knowledge and experience and insights. So thank you to you all, and sorry that we've run over time. Some key takeaways that I've noted: solar in apartment buildings is not always easy. It's a case-by-case scenario, but there are huge cost and environmental benefits that can make the journey worthwhile. If you are getting quotes, base your decision on firm quotes from reputable, experienced solar suppliers, and especially once they've been on site, and so you know what the cost will be up for. I will be sharing a lot of information in a follow-up email. I really appreciate your feedback in an online survey that will be in that email. A link will be distributed, and I really appreciate feedback so that we can make these webinars useful and functional in the future. Appreciate your patience on the technology side of things. We are looking to launch a couple of key programs to support strata and apartment buildings in the next financial year, which is actually starting next week, to support them in identifying energy saving opportunities and implementing them, as well as solar. So I will keep you in touch on that and send you updates on when those programs are available and how to actually register and apply for those. So yeah, so thanks again to everyone who joined us tonight, and thanks again to our presenters, and I wish you a really good evening. Bye.
Thanks, all.
See you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Super useful.
Very useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Great.
Should have got my puppy dog this